From the newsrooms of the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, this is Please Explain. I'm Samantha Selinger-Morris. It's Tuesday, June 6th. A few years ago, Hillsong Church was a byword for glitzy and empowering faith. The global megachurch, which started in Sydney with one small congregation, was the church to the stars. Everyone from Justin Bieber to Chris Pratt worshipped at the church known for its rock concert-like services and gleaming pastors who sported gold watches. But in the last 2 years, the megachurch has been rocked by a series of explosive allegations: tax evasion, a pastor fired for infidelity, and worst of all, an alleged cover-up of the pedophilia committed by the church's co-founder, Brian Houston. Today, one-time megachurch member Cherie Gilmour on the growing number of so-called megachurch refugees and the lasting emotional fallout that results after one leaves the community. So before we get into what actually led you to leave the megachurch that you attended for many years, can you tell me about why you wrote this piece about how Hillsong just might be a failed experiment? You told me, maybe in jest, that you've now outed yourself, and that you had to have a think about whether you wanted to write about this experience at all. So can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, so I guess for me, it was such a big part of my life, and there's so much to untangle. There's a lot of bad stories coming out now, but I don't think that's necessarily the main story for a lot of people. It has been quite a positive thing for a lot of people. So I just wanted to try and present a little bit more of a nuanced perspective and not just add to the big Hillsong pylon, because I think that where it's sort of gone off a little bit, it wasn't always like that. And yeah, this culture of celebrity, I just wanted to point out that, yeah, it's done a lot of damage. It's not good, but it wasn't always like that. So, yeah, I think I just wanted to sort of show how it just veered off track and the results have been quite damaging.
Okay. And so I'd love to hear a bit more about this, about your own experience. So, because you went to a mega church on the northern beaches of Sydney for a number of years, and you wrote in your article about how, like at Hillsong, you were ministered by sort of influential pastors, and they were like celebrities. You know, you knew all the names of the televangelists. You know, they wore gold watches, and, you know, all the girls, and maybe even some of the guys wanted to marry Joel Houston, the son of Hillsong co-founder Brian Houston. So what was it like to be a member of the mega church that you were a part of?
It was amazing at the time. It was so exciting and lively.
What a beautiful name it is, you said. The name of Jesus Christ.
I was a teenager when I joined, so I think as a teenager you're naturally drawn to things that you can be super passionate about. And I'd grown up in a Christian family, so Christianity was suddenly cool. It wasn't this daggy thing that, like, you didn't want to tell your friends about because it's kind of embarrassing that you go to church every Sunday.
You didn't want heaven without us.
It was, like, exciting, and everyone dressed really well, and the music was just pumping, and lots of really amazing people, like lovely, lovely people who were really genuine, and it was very exciting. And you felt like you were on a mission. You felt like you were part of something that was bigger than yourself.
And so I believe the church that you were a member of, it was called C3. Mm-hmm. And did it also have that really aspirational feel that we hear about with Hillsong? And can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so there was definitely elements of the aspirational compared to like a local church where people just in their local community go. There's no sort of world domination plans. You just at your local church. This was sort of like a model that seemed very corporate in its mission, where the goal was to take over the world, to plant not just churches, but this specific brand of church all over the world. And I think with that is probably transplanting the culture of that church. It's very much trying to move away from this traditional model of Christianity, which I think at the time that it started, I don't think it was dying out, but I think they were probably losing a lot of younger people in these sorts of churches. So I think at the time, the goal was to attract young people and to make it exciting and contemporary and fresh.
And so what led you to leave your megachurch? You wrote about the sort of spectacular falls from grace of various megachurch pastors. So can you tell us about, whether that factored into it or whether it was something else?
I think it was just this growing discontent that as I got older, the culture of the church wasn't really reflecting what I believed was the reality of life. So there were a lot of people who were very successful, very wealthy. There was sort of this emphasis on, God wants to bless you, which I think is true, but that looked a lot like what I think we value in society, which is through wealth, through status. And I don't necessarily believe that is true.
Right. And you told me when we spoke on the phone that you and your husband watch a lot of documentaries on cults.
Yeah.
And you said because being raised in the church, you just see in your own church how easily power can just sort of shift very gradually and subtly into something sort of not so good. So can you tell me a bit about the connection that you've noticed between sort of cult leaders and the leaders of the megachurch that you've experienced? Because obviously people throw this around a lot, but what's your own experience with that?
Yeah, I definitely think the word cult is getting thrown around a lot, especially in relation to Hillsong, and I don't necessarily agree with that. But I am fascinated with cult documentaries because I think that you see these little seeds of things that can grow within any organised group of people, whether it's religious or any sort of institution. As soon as there's power and money involved, I think it can warp people who might have started out with the best of intentions. So I think I'm sort of fascinated by cult documentaries because you sort of see how it begins. You see the seeds of these things that can grow and turn into these awful things that just damage so many people.
Of course. And so tell me a bit about that, because you did refer, I don't know if it was in jest, to yourself as being a megachurch refugee. And I know it's not just you. You've got lots of friends too who are sort of refugees from megachurches. Is that right?
Yeah, there's definitely a crew of us. There's a lot of groups on Facebook and people who they call themselves ex-evangelicals.
Hi, I'm Ash. I am an admin of the ex-Hillsong College support group on Facebook. It's a group of about, yesterday I think we were like at 666, which is always like a bit of a laugh for people in Christian circles when you sort of hit that number. But I think we're, close to 700 people in that support group. It's a closed group. It's for people.
I've got a number of friends who were at Hillsong and have had various experiences. My friend Ash had a far more challenging experience than I did.
I do use the word cult quite liberally. It is incredibly demanding of your time. It makes very prescriptive rules around how you live your life. You have to ask permission to date. You weren't allowed to drink alcohol. Your time is absolutely sucked up by the church machinery. Like, it's very hard for people to have paid work. It feels like there's no part of you that isn't related to faith. So when you are moving away from faith, it's like anything in your life that was connected to faith, it sort of gets burned up and it kind of disintegrates. I had to restart to define who I was, what mattered to me, and it felt like I had sort of burned my identity down to ground zero. And
it's sort of advertising this, transformation or this amazing life that's available for you. Not always, but there are a lot of elements of self-help type talk, like about living your best life. And I just remember thinking, I don't think that's the point. I really don't think that's the point, actually, of the Christian faith anymore. I believe God wants to bless people, but I don't think that's the end goal.
Right. And were you shocked by all the allegations that have sort of come out in the last couple of years about Hillsong in particular?
Oh, definitely. I don't think I knew the extent of Frank Houston's pedophilia. I watched the documentary and it was really confronting. But to an extent, like, I've heard stories about these people in high positions falling from grace the whole time that I've been involved in church. So it's sort of a shock, but at the same time, unfortunately, it's not, because, yeah, you hear these stories quite often. And I think it's because they're on a pedestal that people are shocked, but they're sort of so warped by even the pedestal that they've been put on that these terrible things just happen in the shadows, and they've almost got more at stake for people not to find out, and it stays in the dark because they've got so much more to lose.
Right. And so you've written that, now that Hillsong has been cast out of the Garden of Eden, the hundreds and thousands of people who are and have been members can find their way forward. So what has that looked like for you? And what's been the hardest part, I guess, about finding who you are after leaving your megachurch? And what's been the best part of it?
I think for me, it's this constant reflection on my experiences and trying to untangle the good from the bad, especially now that all these things are in the news. You tend to reflect a bit more on your own time. But I think leaving for me, it could have just been an age thing as well, where I just needed a deeper experience of my faith, and I wasn't finding that anymore. I think that's one thing about these sorts of churches, is that they're exciting and they draw in a lot of people, and the music and everything. It's also, but sometimes I think they suffer just because of the size of going any deeper than just the exciting meeting once a week, So, yeah, I think for me it was just branching out and finding different communities that were having more sort of challenging conversations about life and meaning and where is God in suffering, like all these sorts of things which don't necessarily get spoken about as much in megachurches. There can be a lot more emphasis on the success and, the positive sides of faith, and we're all happy. And, I think I just was looking for something a bit more intellectually robust. But yeah, it's hard because it's such a huge part of your life for so long, and you've got friends there. It's like you're leaving a type of family.
Cherie, thank you for joining us.
No worries. Thanks for chatting.
Today's episode of Please Explain was produced by Hannah Mills-Turbot, with technical assistance from Julia Carr-Katzel. Our executive producer is Ruby Schwartz. Please Explain is a production of The Age and the Sydney Morning Herald. If you enjoy the show and want more of our journalism, subscribe to our newspapers today. It's the best way to support what we do. Search The Age or smh.com.au/subscribe. I'm Samantha Selinger Morris. This is Please Explain. Thanks for listening.